next is our last speaker for the evening to provide a unique perspective on all of the things that we have been discussing tonight. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser is here to have us get his view from Denver. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all. It is really an honor to be with you. I want to share a few of my thoughts and then have hopefully a little time for some questions. The question that I think about a lot, and I know is core to what you're talking about, is how do we best manage our water in a way that is fair and serves all of Colorado? This is not a new challenge, but it's one that takes on some urgency today, and it's one that we stand on the shoulders of giants, of strong leaders who've addressed this issue. As I think about this, I do so from the standpoint of being the Attorney General for the state, and with water being one of the most important parts of our portfolio. So let me start talking about the Colorado River, which I know the River District has focused on, and that this community here in Summit County and others are looking at asking critical questions about how do we approach this moment, recognizing that the existing guidelines have been proven to be inadequate to meet the circumstances that we have, and that we have to work on multiple levels to develop new solutions. I want to talk about three things. First, what are we doing here in Colorado right now? Second, how do Colorado and others take some emergency measures that will protect the basin? And third, what are the long-term solutions going to look like? So first, what are we doing right now here in Colorado? Over the last 20 years, we've had a continuing series of droughts, and we've had to learn to do more with less water. During this time, we've become a leader in the upper division states, and in fact, with many of you and others working on this, we have quickly and effectively moved on a number of fronts to ask, how can we meet this moment? One of the opportunities that we've looked at has been a demand management feasibility investigation. We've now gotten to a point that we're waiting for the Upper Colorado River Commission to actually catch up to this work. We're open to complete it in the fall. This is only one tool that we are looking at. Another critical one that we're looking at, I'll get to in a minute, would be conservation. And the goal here is to avoid the risk that we would face of having to have curtailment under the 1922 Compact. Conservation is not a new concept that we've been looking at. We've been a leader, and other states have looked to us. We've invested in how do we build more efficient, how do we build better conservation programs, and we'll keep doing so. Right now, we're one of the few states in the nation who manages our water rights according to the availability of water. And going forward, this is a foundation that we are going to build on. And we're going to continue to invest in efforts to how we better measure and manage and provide infrastructure here in the upper division states. And that's going to be aided by investments in our Federal Infrastructure Act. Let me talk about these emergency measures. I know they're on our minds. The short term, we are having to manage our water in the Colorado River with an awareness that we have gotten to a place that we'd hoped we weren't going to get to, but increasingly we saw we would have to, which is our drought contingency plan and the 2022 drought response operations plan has called on us to basically finalize arrangements to do things we haven't had to do before. And the Secretary of Interior has approved this plan, and it is focused on how do we maintain these critical elevations at Lake Powell, which provides obviously electricity and water supplies that so many depend on. Under this plan, 500,000 acre-feet of water from the Flaming Gorge Reservoir are going to be released to Lake Powell, in addition to the 161,000 acre-feet that's been released from the Flaming Gorge and Blue Mesa reservoirs in 2022 already. Importantly for Colorado, there are no new releases from the Blue Mesa Reservoir in this 2022 plan. What this means for the Upper Basin is we will have released a total of 661,000 acre-feet of water to protect the overall system. That's a lot of water. Just consider that this is about 15% of the annual consumptive uses in the upper basin. Now, although it's significant, it turns out it's not and can't be a long-term solution. I recognize it's going to take years for the upper basin reservoirs to recover from the releases that are called for in this 2022 agreement. Beyond the short-term solution, we've got to look at the longer-term question of how we manage depleted storage and the impacts that we're seeing to the hydrology on account of climate change. And I want to acknowledge your director, and I saw Andy Mueller here somewhere, who has stated plainly what all of us know to be the case. We are confronting climate change and the impact on water in a way that demands our attention and that we can't look the other way. As I emphasized when I spoke with the River District in Glenwood Springs in December, the lower basin is now confronting some pretty extraordinary circumstances. The lower basin is now, for the first time, developing a plan that they're calling 500-plus plan, where they're going to work to leave 500,000 acre-feet in Lake Mead each year for the next 2 years to deal with the fact that we've depleted storage. We look forward to seeing how this plan develops. In addition to the 2022 plan, the Department of Interior has approved some additional actions protecting dam operations, the facility reliability, the hydropower operations, and health and public safety concerns. In particular, the Secretary is going to reduce the annual release volume from Lake Powell to Lake Mead from 7.48 million acre-feet to 7 million acre-feet. That's a 6.5% reduction for the water year 2022. And while the Colorado River Basin states recognize the Secretary as the authority to take this action, the basin states have all requested the Secretary include protections to avoid outcomes that would negatively impact the basin states' interests and positions. That proposal, including the adoption of protections that the basin states recommended, was finalized just recently on May 6, 2022. These are all significant and meaningful actions the upper division states and the Secretary of Interior took to protect Lake Powell during this critical time. This framework is only a temporary solution. It will protect Colorado and the upper basin states through April 2023, preserving benefits to Lake Powell under this 2022 plan, and the Secretary has reduced releases. But we got to look at long-term solutions. Let me talk for a few minutes on that. The long-term solutions require a head-on recognition that there's an imbalance between the depletions and the available supplies across the basin. In short, we all need to recognize the risks to Lake Powell are due to this ongoing drought, and as Andy has emphasized, climate change and depleted storage. We also must recognize depleted storage at Lake Powell is largely the result of the releases that have been going on to meet those downstream actions in Lake Mead, Lower Basin, and Mexico. And as we look back over those 20 years, it's clear the Lower Basin states were able to avoid recognizing the changing water picture that we saw here in Colorado because they were just drawing down Lake Mead and Lake Powell as reservoirs above them. Their ability to do so was a limitation of the 2007 interim guidelines. Those guidelines allowed lower basin consumptive uses to actually increase and to deplete Lake Powell and Lake Mead, avoiding short-term shortages in the lower basin. Now, to recognize what this means, let's review the basic math. At present, the upper basin consumes about 3 million acre-feet less than what the compact apportionment calls for. This is because we've had 20 years of drought, and we've not had large reservoirs upstream that could deal with the fact that we have less natural snowpack that we've seen over the last 20 years. When demand outpaces the availability of natural supply, as it's happened a lot in the last 20 years, Colorado administers our water rights according to priority administration, and that means the upper basin states have had to deal with the brunt of this drought. By contrast, the lower basin states, and I explained this again in my talk in December, have been consuming far more than their apportionment. Rather than administering water rights and limiting uses to the available supply from Lake Mead during the last 20 years, they released more water from Lake Mead, and in turn Lake Powell. And now, that option doesn't exist anymore, which means the lower basin states have to meaningfully address their overuse. there's some good news to look forward to, which is we now have the opportunity to learn from experience, working under the 2007 interim guidelines and making the next set of reservoir operating rules better for all the basin states. We've got a crack team in the Attorney General's office. This is a top priority for us. We're working closely with our Commissioner, Becky Mitchell, and we're committed to the process of listening to, learning from, and working with all of you as we inform this critical work. This is going to mean we provide support for ongoing negotiations throughout the development of what are post-2026 reservoir operating rules, concurrently preparing for possible litigation, should that become necessary. We are not afraid of that. In fact, we have hired 2 new members of our team with support from the River District. We got 2 new people from the state legislature, and with great appreciation for Dylan Roberts, who's here, who supported that effort. This work is essential to the future of Colorado. As we think about this work, there are some goals that are going to guide how we do it and what we seek to accomplish. We need more additional water supply security. We have to address this lower basin overuse I talked about. We're going to work hard to avoid the risk of curtailment in the upper basin. We're going to work on how we improve the operations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. We're going to work on how we better coordinate with Mexico, and we are committed to maintaining compliance with established federal environmental law. Each of these goals is rooted in an existing legal and regulatory framework that's been established under the Colorado River Compact and further developed by laws and agreements that are generally known as the law of the river. Any new operating rules that will happen need to ensure that those interstate compacts from 1922 and 48 and the relevant international treaty of 44 continue to form a foundation for how the operations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead work. These rules also must recognize the state's exclusive roles and responsibilities in the basin and balance any depletions against water supply. In a world where we're vulnerable to these risks of variable hydrology across the river basin, we can't allow the depletions that have been happening in the lower basin to go on. Finally, a related topic, which is how do we manage water within Colorado? I know that's not core on what the agenda has always been, but I will say I worry about both problems. And I worry about short-term opportunistic actions that aren't done with the spirit of we're all in this together. As we plan for our future in Colorado, we must resist any temptations to allow communities to be pitted against one another. We must pursue a path of collaboration and a shared commitment to innovation and problem solving. That's what the Colorado Water Plan calls for, and it condemns efforts to have wholesale, buy, and dry plans that we have seen before. Unfortunately, that insistence of the water plan does not necessarily make it so. Indeed, currently, we have a misguided plan being evaluated by Douglas County. In particular, it's a plan known as Renewable Water Resources that is pitching Douglas County on spending federal recovery dollars, which, by the way, I think they may have decided today they're not going to do, to ship water from the San Luis Valley to Douglas County. This would happen at a time when the valley already faces depleted aquifers. As I've made clear before and will again, this Renewable Water Resources Plan is dangerous for Colorado. That's why I'll fight it. As you know, this is not only about the San Luis Valley. This is about how we manage water in Colorado more generally. The right way to manage water is asking what's fair for all of us. This proposal isn't. The Valley is against this, and as communities, including the Valley, but others, ask, how do we protect ourselves against plans that prey on us, where, if you will, we're not at the table, we're on the menu? We have answered. We will help in our office, including on how to use 1041 authority or relevant alternatives so the communities can protect themselves and not be taken advantage of, but instead be at the table and be a part of critical decisions about their future. As I look back at the history of Colorado, I see leaders who served as effective stewards of our water. That prepares us for this challenging moment. We have a roadmap for the work ahead in Colorado on the water plan. Collaboration and innovation can guide us. And we've got challenges working with our neighboring states under the Colorado River Compact. I believe we can meet those challenges, and I appreciate you for being a part of that important work. Thank you.